Naomi Ellis Brooks didn't hear the fire alarm at first. She heard the laughter. It floated up through the thin metal door of her apartment, high and bright and wrong, riding on the smell of gasoline. It sounded like carnival laughter, like the wild cackle of someone who had already decided there was nothing left to lose. Then, the smoke slipped under the door. It came in a low gray ribbon at first, lazy and curious, curling over the cheap linoleum in her tiny fifth-floor hallway. Naomi stared at it for one stunned heartbeat, her mind refusing to match the picture in front of her with the reality of her life. She was standing barefoot in her living room, still wearing the strange dress she had sewn out of an old burgundy curtain. The singer machine sat on the table behind her, needle still threaded, fabric scraps scattered like fallen petals. A phone on the counter showed a frozen frame from her live stream, comments still ticking upward. The laughter came again, closer now, right outside. "Burn, Naomi, burn!" Darius' voice, muffled but unmistakable, slid under the door with the smoke. "No diary, no apartment, no jail. I solved everything. I'm a genius." For a second, Naomi's brain showed her another picture, her husband at 30, in a sharp suit, smiling for a LinkedIn headshot, ambitious, charming. A corporate man on the rise in downtown Detroit. Now he was in the hallway pouring gasoline under her door. The smell hit her all at once, sharp, chemical, almost sweet. Her eyes stung, her lungs clenched. Somewhere far away, a siren wailed. But it might have been in another city, another life. "Darius?" she choked, stepping toward the door. "What are you doing?" "Stop, please," he answered her by flicking the lighter. She didn't see it, but she heard the sound, the tiny scrape of metal that might as well have been a judge's gavel. A moment later, a thin, orange tongue of fire slid under the door, found the gasoline, and roared to life. The hallway outside her apartment exploded with light. The heat hit first. It punched through the thin wood and fake leather like it wasn't even there. The air itself seemed to turn solid and hot. Naomi stumbled backwards as the door began to glow, the cheap upholstery blistering and curling, black smoke billowing into the room. "Naomi!" Darius yelled from the other side, his words slurred with alcohol and something darker. "You wanted to show the world, right? You wanted to make me famous online? Let's give them a real show." The smoke thickened. It tasted bitter and poisonous. Naomi coughed, her chest seizing, eyes watering almost shut. The building's ancient alarm finally shrieked to life, a high pulsing scream over her head, but the sound came through cotton. The fire was too close. The world shrank to one small burning box. She spun, wild, looking for a way out. Front door, already a wall of smoke and heat. No way. Kitchen, tiny, window too narrow, flames licking into the doorway. Bedroom, one big window, 5 floors up, concrete below. She grabbed the two things her mind still recognized as precious, her phone and the worn, oilcloth-covered diary that had belonged to her mother, Etta Ellis. The diary disappeared into the bag that never left her shoulder. The phone went into her pocket. The rest of her life, furniture, clothes, the old singer machine that had belonged to Mama Etta, was left to the fire. "Help!" Naomi screamed, stumbling toward the bedroom. "Somebody, please!" She reached the window and yanked at the lock. The paint, 50 years old and layered, stuck stubbornly. Smoke followed her into the room, filling it with a dirty gray curtain. The heat behind her grew, pressing on her back like a hand. "Move, Naomi," she told herself, voice hoarse. "Don't think. Move." She grabbed the nearest heavy thing, a dining chair, swung it with all the strength left in her shoulders, and smashed it against the glass. On the third hit, the window shattered outward in a shower of shards, spilling cold Detroit night into the burning room. Wind rushed in, hard and freezing, clawing at her hair and the hem of her curtain dress. The sudden cold was a slap after the heat, but it wasn't mercy. It was a deadline. She looked down. 5 floors below, the courtyard between the two wings of the apartment building was a hard gray rectangle of concrete splashed with dirty snow. Her breath caught. Her legs tried to lock. She could see people, now neighbors, running out into the courtyard in coats thrown over pajamas, pointing up at her window, shouting words she couldn't hear. Somewhere in the distance, sirens grew louder, closer. Flashing red danced across the glass of the building across the street. "Mom!" a male voice yelled from below, distant but fierce. "Don't jump straight down. Slide to the balcony roof." Naomi blinked, forcing her eyes to focus. One floor below hers, pressed against the building like a metal shelf, was the shallow roof of a fourth-floor balcony. Someone's closed-in porch, thin sheet metal, dusted with snow, angled toward the edge. One chance. Maybe. Or not. Behind her, the roar of the fire grew teeth. The ceiling in the living room was catching. Flames began to lick around the bedroom doorway, eating the cheap wood frame, reaching for the curtains. The smoke turned black, so thick she could barely see the dresser across the room. She thought, for a split second, of her mother lying in a box of cold satin, of how Etta had always smelled faintly of fabric and starch, of the way she had run calloused fingers over Naomi's hair and said, "Baby, don't spend your whole life apologizing for taking up space. The world will do enough of that for you." Naomi had spent 35 years apologizing anyway. She realized, with startling clarity, that she was not going to die in a dress sewn from a curtain while her husband laughed in the hallway. Not for him, not in his fire, not in his story. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, tasted soot and salt, and swung one leg over the broken windowsill. The cracked glass bit into her calf. She hissed, but barely felt the pain through the adrenaline. Wind clawed at her, trying to pull her out before she was ready. From below, someone screamed. Someone else prayed out loud. "Naomi!" Another voice, closer now, from the street. She couldn't see who it was. "Hold on! Ladder's coming!" The wall behind her popped with a loud, wet sound as the paint blistered and burst under the heat. The ceiling over the hallway sagged. The fire was eating the skeleton of the building. There was no more time. She stepped out onto the outer ledge, her thin soles slipping on snow and broken glass. One hand locked around the cold brick of the window frame. The drop yawned beneath her feet, dizzying, endless. "On 3, she whispered to herself, voice shaking. 1, 2. She didn't make it to 3. The brick beneath her fingers crumbled suddenly, old mortar giving up at the worst possible moment. Her grip slid. The wind punched her in the chest. Naomi let go. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but air and the sound of her own short scream. Then her body hit the slanted metal of the balcony roof below with a bone-jarring thud. The impact knocked the breath out of her and sent her sliding on the thin slick of snow. The edge of the roof came fast. Her legs slipped over the side, dangling over the gap to the concrete 4 stories below. Her nails tore as she clawed at the smooth metal, fingers searching desperately for anything to hold onto. At the last possible second, her right hand smacked against the narrow metal rail that jutted up from the edge of the balcony. Her fingers closed around it with a strength she didn't know she had. Her shoulders screamed, her body jerked, half hanging over nothing. For a moment, she hung there, one arm stretched, the rest of her weight dragging her down. The world shrank to the cold bite of the metal under her fingers, the scream of her shoulder joint, the wild drum of her heart. Above her, fire belched out of the broken 5th-floor window she had just escaped. Flames rolled out like the breath of some furious animal, curling into the night. Smoke poured into the sky, sirens howled right under her now. A fire truck had pulled into the courtyard, red lights painting the white ribs of the ladders. Firefighters in heavy gear scrambled, voices overlapping in clipped commands. "Get the aerial up, watch for falling glass." "Mom, don't let go. We see you." Naomi focused on the sound of that last voice, clung to it like she clung to the railing. Her fingers were going numb. Sweat and melted snow made the metal slippery. Her arms shook with effort. The diary thumped against her hip inside the bag, a stubborn weight. Her phone pressed, unbroken, against her thigh. Somewhere under all that physical panic, her mind still whispered, "That's Mama's handwriting. That's my proof. Don't drop it. Don't drop it." The ladder finally reached her, a bright metal bridge lowering out of the dark. A firefighter crawled along it toward her, tether clipped to his belt, his face half hidden behind his mask. "I've got you," he called, calm and certain. "Don't look down. Just keep holding on. I've got you." Naomi almost laughed. She had spent 10 years holding on to a man who let her fall. Now, a stranger in a helmet was promising not to let her slip away. The irony tasted like smoke. Strong hands wrapped around her wrist and forearm, adding their grip to hers. The firefighter braced himself and pulled. Pain shot through her shoulder, white and bright. But then her chest cleared the railing, and her legs landed on solid metal. The firefighter dragged her fully into the bucket of the aerial ladder and slammed a safety bar down in front of her. He squeezed her shoulder, eyes searching her face through the mask. "You're okay now," he shouted over the roar. "Stay with me, ma'am." "Can you breathe?" Naomi tried. The first inhale was shallow and full of soot, but air went in. That alone felt like a small miracle. She nodded, then coughed until her eyes watered again. In less than a minute, they were back on the ground. Medics wrapped a silver thermal blanket around her thin shoulders and sat her on the back bumper of the ambulance. Someone put an oxygen mask over her face. Someone else shined a light in her pupils and asked her name, her age, what day it was. Her answers came out small and automatic. Naomi Ellis Brooks, 35, July. "I don't know the date. My mama died in March." The medic paused at that, looked at her for a second longer, then just nodded and tucked the blanket tighter. Across the courtyard, 2 police officers wrestled Darius toward the back of a patrol car. His jacket was open over a t-shirt. Soot smeared his face, hair wild. He was still laughing high and sharp at nothing in particular. "That's my wife up there," he shouted at anyone who would listen. "I warmed her up." She was cold. "I'm a good husband." When he finally saw Naomi alive, sitting on the ambulance bumper wrapped in silver like some fragile baked potato, the laughter twisted. Disappointment flashed across his face like a cloud covering the sun. He lunged toward her, veins standing out in his neck, eyes wild. "She's using this!" he screamed, trying to kick free of the officer's hold. "She's using this to get views! This is content to her!" The officer drove a forearm into his back, pushed him down, and shoved his head under the car door frame. "Watch your head," the cop said dryly, then slammed the door shut on the rest of his words. Through the glass, Naomi and Darius locked eyes for one brief, electric second. There was no love in that look. No regret. No trace of the man who had once held her hand at a bus stop and promised to take her out of the neighborhood, to give her a better life than her mama's. There was only fury that she was still alive. He had burned her home, tried to burn her body, and he was angry it hadn't worked. Naomi felt something inside her settle and harden. Whatever part of her had still been hoping, somewhere deep down, that this was all some horrible misunderstanding, some break she could forgive, died right there in that shared glance. That woman went into the fire and didn't come back out. A new one took her place. If you're hearing this and thinking, "No way I would have let it get that bad," let me tell you something as the one reading you this story tonight. People don't start in burning buildings. They start with little things. Little compromises. Little excuses. Hez under stress. She doesn't mean it that way. This is just a phase. They start by apologizing for taking up space, like Naomi did. By the time you smell smoke, sometimes it's already almost too late. My name's not important. I'm just your storyteller for the night, but Naomi's name is, her mother's name is. The choices she makes after this moment matter, because they're the reason you're listening to this video instead of watching a crime documentary about a woman who died in a house fire. If you've ever stayed too long in a bad situation because you were scared to leave, if you've ever put someone else's comfort above your own safety, I want you to listen all the way to the end of Naomi's story. And if you want YouTube to keep sending you real stories like this, stories that feel a little too close to home sometimes, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, tap the like, and let the algorithm know you're still awake. Because to understand how a husband ends up laughing outside a burning door, and how a woman ends up climbing out of a 5th-floor window in a dress made from curtains, we have to go back 4 months, back to a cold afternoon in March 2025, in Detroit, Michigan. The day Naomi's mother died. March in Detroit is a strange month. On the weather app, it says spring. On the ground, it still looks like late winter that refused to leave. That afternoon, the sky over downtown was the color of dishwater, and a thin mix of rain and snow scraped against the windows of a corporate apartment on the 15th floor. Inside, Naomi Ellis Brooks sat at the small kitchen table with her hands folded around a mug that had gone cold an hour ago. The call from the hospital had come at exactly 12:07 p.m. "Miss Brooks? This is Detroit Mercy Hospital. I'm calling about your mother, Miss Etta Ellis." The rest had come in a dry, practiced tone, the way people learn to talk when they say the same hard thing 10 times a day. Cardiac arrest. No response to resuscitation. Time of death. Arrangements. Naomi didn't remember hanging up. She just remembered one word pulsing in her ears, louder than the traffic outside and the neighbor's TV and the buzz of the fridge. Expired. Like milk. Like a parking meter. As if a human being who had worked her hands raw for 35 years could just expire. Now the kettle on the stove had gone quiet, the burner off. Her phone lay on the table in front of her, like something dangerous. She had tried to call Darius once, then twice, then stopped. His voicemail was full. That felt fitting. She stared at a spot on the wall until the apartment door slammed open. Darius came in like he came in from most workdays, fast, already talking, loosening his tie with one hand and scrolling his phone with the other. The smell of cold air and office building clung to him. He stopped short when he hit the living room and looked around. No roasting pan in the oven, no casserole on the counter, no smell of anything but coffee and old carpet. "What is this?" he snapped. "Naomi, where's the duck?" She looked up at him slowly. Her eyes were red but dry now. Her voice sanded down to its barest edge. "Mama's gone," she said. "She died at noon." For a second, for half a heartbeat, something in his face flickered. Surprise, maybe. Then it smoothed over into irritation, like a man seeing a flat tire when he's already late. "Died?" he repeated. "Well," he shrugged, an ugly little lift of one shoulder. "We all gotta go sometime." She was what, 63? Bad heart for years. It was coming. Naomi's fingers tightened around the mug. "She was my mother," she said, more to herself than to him. "That doesn't change the fact that it's Thursday," Darius shot back, tossing his phone onto the couch. "Did you not hear me this morning? Today is the day, Naomi. New CEO is coming over. Leonard Ellis. The man controls my entire future at the company. Whether I move up or get stuck where I am depends on tonight." He walked into the kitchen, opened the oven, slammed it shut again when he saw it was empty. "Where is the duck?" he demanded. "Where are the appetizers? Why aren't you cooking?" "Because my mama is lying in a hospital morgue," Naomi said, each word heavier than the last. "I've been sitting here trying to remember the last thing I said to her, and it sure wasn't bye. Mama, enjoy the afterlife." "I can't host a dinner tonight, Darius. Call Mr. Ellis. Tell him." "Tell him what?" Darius stepped in close, towering a little with the easy arrogance of a man who thinks the space around him belongs to him by default. "Tell him, sorry, sir, we can't impress you tonight because my wife's mother died?" He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to send the message. "This isn't some church potluck we can reschedule," he hissed. "This is the new CEO of the logistics division. He is driving across town, in Detroit traffic, to see how his potential VP lives." "I am not your hostess tonight," Naomi whispered. "I am a daughter in mourning," he laughed then, a short, mean sound. "You're whatever I need you to be tonight. And what I need is a calm, smiling wife who can make this table look like Thanksgiving." He jerked his chin toward the window. "You want to test me? That lease is in the firm's name. This is corporate housing. You? You're not on anything. I can have you out on Jefferson Avenue with a trash bag and a suitcase before sundown." Naomi glanced at the gray city beyond the glass. The river, the freeway, the endless rows of brick. Her mother's house was miles away on the east side, and the keys were in a plastic patient bag she hadn't picked up yet. She had nowhere to go but here. "You wouldn't," she said, voice small. "Try me." He stepped back. satisfied head made his point. You've got 4 hours. Wash your face, put on some makeup, do your magic in the kitchen. When Mr. Ellis walks in, he needs to see a man who has everything under control. That includes his home. And his wife? When he left the kitchen, her legs gave out. She slid into the chair, her body trembling, not from cold, but from the collision of grief and fear. For 10 long minutes, she sat there, staring at her own hands. Then she stood. She pulled ingredients from the fridge like an automaton. Duck, onions, garlic. Her hands moved on habit while her mind played the last week with Mama Etta on a loop, dropping off groceries. Etta saying she felt off, that little cough she hadn't liked. Naomi promising they'd go to the doctor next week. When things settle down. Things never settled down. By the time the duck was in the oven and the table was set with the good plates they never used, the clock on the stove blinked 6:30. Naomi went into the bedroom and opened the closet. Her fingers brushed over the bright coral dress. Darius liked the one he called her promotion dress. She stared at it for a moment, then moved past it and pulled out something else. A black dress, high neck, long sleeves, the fabric falling straight to mid-calf. Simple, severe, and in its own quiet way, defiant. She slipped it on, twisted her hair into a low bun, and looked at herself in the cracked mirror. A stranger looked back, a woman who had run out of room to be soft. On her wrist, as always, lay Mama Etta's silver locket on a chain, 2 crossed keys, and a phoenix etched into the metal. Etta had pressed it into her palm on her 18th birthday, closing Naomi's fingers over it like sealing a promise. "Keep this on you," Shed said. "No matter what." At exactly 7, the doorbell rang. Darius' charm slid over him like a suit jacket. He opened the door with a wide smile. Naomi had watched him practice in front of the mirror. "Mr. Ellis," he boomed. "What an honor. Please, come in." Leonard Ellis stepped over the threshold with the careful dignity of a man who had spent his life both giving orders and counting costs. Mid-60s, brown skin lined at the eyes, short gray beard, dark overcoat, hand resting on a cane with a silver handle. His gaze swept the small living room in one slow pass: the bargain sofa, the view of the river, the 2 bright light fixtures Darius had never replaced. "Mr. Brooks," he said. His voice was deep, unhurried. "I hope the drive was worth it." "Oh, absolutely," Darius said quickly. "My wife is a miracle in the kitchen." "Naomi!" He reached back, fingers closing around her elbow a little too tight as he pulled her forward. "This is my wife, Naomi Ellis Brooks," he said. "Naomi, this is Mr. Leonard Ellis, our new CEO." Naomi tried to smile, but her throat closed. The words, "nice to meet you," got tangled somewhere behind her teeth. She bowed her head instead. "Pleasure," Leonard said curtly, eyes flicking over her black dress, her bare face, the way her fingers twitched at her side. Darius moved into performance mode. Jokes. Work stories. Wine poured generously into glasses that had never been used before. Naomi drifted between kitchen and table, refilling plates, changing forks, her vision blurring at the edges. At some point, while she leaned in to take a plate, Darius kicked her under the table. Hard. She gasped, catching herself on the back of a chair. "What's wrong with you, honey?" Leonard asked, looking up. "You've been shaking like a leaf all evening." "She's just clumsy," Darius cut in with a laugh. "And too sentimental. Saw a stray kitten this morning. Been crying off and on all day. Women, right?" He thought he was being charming. It made Leonard's mouth tighten. Naomi took a breath, picked up the wine bottle, and moved to Leonard's side to refill his glass. Her hand shook, the bottle neck clicking against the crystal. "Sorry," she murmured. "Easy there," Leonard said, reaching out automatically to steady her wrist. His fingers closed around her skin. The cuff of her sleeve slid back an inch. The silver locket caught the light. For a heartbeat, everything in the room froze. Then Leonard's grip tightened, not in aggression, but in shock. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice gone suddenly rough. Naomi's eyes widened. "My mama gave it to me," she said. "Said it was the only thing she kept from..." Before. She told me never to take it off. Leonard lifted the locket with careful fingers. His eyes traced the tiny crest, 2 crossed keys, a phoenix rising. Color drained from his face. What was your mother's name? He asked, looking straight into Naomi's eyes now. Etta, Naomi whispered. Etta Ellis. The cane hit the floor with a dull thunk as Leonard pushed back his chair and stood. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Not the way a CEO looks at an employee's spouse, but the way a man looks at a ghost he's been chasing for 30 years. Etta is my sister, he said, each word landing heavy in the small room. My baby sister. In that instant, Darius' entire script disintegrated. The nice dinner, the big impression, the carefully staged picture of a promising middle manager with a sweet, supportive wife, gone. He stared between them, face bleaching. Your sister? He repeated. Sir, I didn't know Naomi. Never. Naomi barely heard him. Her legs wobbled. She gripped the back of a chair. Your Uncle Leo? She asked. The name she'd heard once, long ago, from Etta's lips. The brother who went one way while she ran the other. Leonard closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, there was grief there, and anger, and something else, guilt. Etta ran from our father's house to save herself and her child, he said quietly. I looked for her for years, and all this time, she was here, in my city, in my division, and I never knew. He looked toward the window, toward some point beyond the glass. When did she die? He asked. Today, Naomi said. At noon. The chandelier hummed. Traffic whispered far below. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Leonard turned, very slowly, to Darius. And you? He said, his voice now stripped of all warmth, pure steel underneath, forced my sister's daughter to cook for me the same day her mother died? Forced her to serve you like hired help in a corporate apartment you thought you earned? Darius opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Sir, with all respect, I was under a lot of pressure. I didn't know you and Etta stopped talking, Leonard snapped. He reached into his inside pocket, pulled out his phone, and hit a speed dial. This is Ellis, he said. Get legal on the line and pull the file on the Jefferson Tower corporate unit. 15th floor. I want to know exactly whose books it's on. Darius watched him, Adam's apple bobbing. The answer came back on speaker. Mr. Ellis, that building was moved off the holding company 5 years ago. It belongs to the Ellis Family Trust. Occupancy was flagged as monitor per your instructions. No formal tenant of record. Only a spouse on HR paperwork for Mr. Brooks. Leonard ended the call with a tap. He looked at Naomi. This apartment, he said, belongs to the trust my sister walked away from, and the only rightful heir she left on this earth is standing in front of me. Then he turned back to Darius. So tell me, Mr. Brooks, Leonard said quietly, who exactly did you think you were threatening to throw out into the street? The question Leonard asked hung in the room long after he left. So tell me, Mr. Brooks, who exactly did you think you were threatening to throw out into the street? It didn't all explode that night. Life almost never does. It cracked, slowly, along fault lines that had been there for years. Over the next few weeks, things moved in 2 directions at once, forward toward a funeral and backward toward the truth. By the time March dragged itself to an end, Detroit finally gave up pretending it wasn't winter. The day they buried Etta Ellis, the wind coming off the river cut through coats and gloves like it had a grudge. The cemetery was small, on the edge of the city where grass gave way to bare trees and low chain-link fence. Naomi stood beside the open grave in her black dress and borrowed boots, fingers clenched around the strap of her bag. The casket looked too small. Her mother had seemed larger in life, somehow. A few neighbors from the east side came, 2 women from the sewing factory. Leonard stood a little apart in a dark overcoat, cane planted in the frozen ground, his face set in a way that said, this was not the first gravehead watched go into the earth, and it never got easier. Darius did not stand with Naomi. He arrived late, in a shiny car Naomi didn't recognize, with a thin man in an overcoat who carried a leather briefcase. They walked down the path like they were headed to a meeting, not a burial. "Stop!" the man with the briefcase called as the pastor began to speak. "There's a legal issue here. You already know what came next. The paper with Etta's shaky signature, the so-called power of attorney, the demand to halt the burial and keep Etta's body in a city morgue until the property issues are resolved. The pressure on Naomi to sign away a patch of dead land in Oakwood Heights she'd barely thought about since childhood. What Darius didn't count on was Leonard having better information and better lawyers than his little courthouse hustler. A few taps on a phone, a look at a state website, and the picture snapped into focus. The new interstate extension would slice straight through Oakwood Heights. The land wasn't worthless. It was $1 million target. By the time the pastor finally finished the prayer and the first shovelful of dirt hit the lid of the casket, Naomi knew 3 things with a clarity that hurt. Her mother had died that week. Her husband had lied to her for years, and he would have let Etta's body sit on ice for months if it meant one more signature on a deed. A week after the funeral, Naomi went to clean out her mother's duplex on the east side. The little 2-story had always smelled like fabric and frying oil and the lemon cleaner Etta used on Saturdays. Now it smelled like dust and old medicine. The TV was still on the religious channel Etta liked. The blanket she always kept over her knees was folded neatly on the couch, as if she'd just stepped out for a minute. Naomi moved slowly, folding clothes into boxes for donation, stacking dishes, setting aside the few things that were truly hers: family photos, a chipped mug with a fading church logo, the metal tin where Etta kept her buttons. In the bedroom, wedged between the window and the closet, stood Etta's dress form. "Miss Hattie," Naomi whispered, running her palm over the faded canvas. Her mother had talked to it like a friend when she sewed late into the night. "Hold still, Miss Hattie, or this hem will come out crooked." Naomi wrapped her arms around the mannequin, cheek pressed to the rough fabric, and for the first time in days, she let herself sob without holding back. Grief came in waves, guilt, anger, an ache so deep it felt like it had its own pulse. When the storm passed, she pulled back, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand. That was when she felt it, a hard ridge under the canvas, at the base of the mannequin's neck. She frowned and ran her fingers along the seam. The stitching there was newer, barely visible in the dim bedroom light. Etta had been good with a needle. Too good. "Mama," Naomi murmured. "What did you hide, old girl?" She fetched a pair of small scissors from the sewing table, slipped the tip under the line of thread, and snipped. The seam gave way. From the space between the canvas and the stuffing, she pulled out a flat, oilcloth-wrapped bundle tied with string. Her hands shook as she untied it. Inside was a thick notebook, the cheap kind you buy in packs of 3. The first page was dated, the year written carefully. January 2024. The handwriting was her mother's, small, neat, the letters leaning forward like they were in a hurry to get somewhere. Naomi sank down onto the edge of the bed and began to read. At first, it was small things. Notes about the weather, complaints about her knees, a mention of Naomi bringing groceries. Then the name she'd been trying not to think about showed up on the page like an unwelcome guest. Darius came by again. Etta had written. Said Naomi was having trouble at work. Said they needed money fast. I gave him the last $200 I had in my envelope. He said not to tell her. He doesn't like her to worry. Naomi stared at the words until they blurred. Turned the page. Darius talking about the land now. Read another entry. Says that lot in Oakwood Heights ain't safe. Old neighborhood, bad kids, nothing but trouble. Wants me to sell it. Says hell invest it for Naomi. I told him no. That land is where her daddy and I met. It's the only piece of him I have left. The entries grew more strained as the weeks went on. Darius raised his voice today. Said I was a stubborn old woman sitting on a pot of gold. My heart hurt bad after he left. He didn't even bring me water. Then, near the back, the handwriting changed. The letters grew shaky, the ink blotting where the pen had paused too long. The 11th of April 2025. Darius came with medicine today. Said he got me the good stuff. Imported pills for my heart. Blue bottle. Label looked strange to me. A little crooked. He watched me take one. I felt dizzy. Hot. Chest burned like fire. When he went to the bathroom, I looked in the trash, saw Head peeled the label off something else and stuck it on this one. Lord, I think he wants me gone. Naomi's breath hitched. If I die, the last entry read, and anyone ever reads this, know it wasn't my heart quitting on its own. Check the blue bottle in the cabinet. He switched my pills. I'm too scared to call Naomi. He said if I make trouble, something bad will happen to her. God protect my girl. The rest of the page was smeared, as if a hand had dragged through wet ink. There were no more entries after that. Naomi sat very still, the notebook open in her lap, while the light outside shifted from gray to darker gray. The idea that had been buzzing at the back of her mind since the funeral stepped fully into the room. Mama hadn't just died. Someone had helped her along, and that someone had sat at Naomi's table, slept in her bed, kissed her forehead in church. She put the diary gently into her bag, next to the locket. Then she stood, walked into the tiny bathroom where Etta kept her medicine, and opened the mirrored cabinet. Rows of orange and white bottles stared back at her. Blood pressure, cholesterol, heart pills, with a generic label, bandages, cough syrup, a small jar of menthol rub. On the middle shelf, a ring of dust marked an empty spot the size of a small bottle. The blue bottle was gone. Naomi closed the cabinet slowly, meeting her own eyes in the glass. There was fear there, yes. But there was something else now, too. Something colder. Something that looked a little like resolve. Detroit's 9th Precinct was busy in the way only a city station can be, phones ringing, radios crackling, officers moving in and out with files and coffee. Naomi sat on a hard plastic chair across from a desk where a young detective with tired eyes thumbed through Etta's notebook. "Miss Brooks," he said finally, "I'm sorry for your loss, really. But this—" He tapped the diary. "This is just your mother's impressions." She wrote that he switched her pills, Naomi said, her voice tight. She wrote that her heart didn't just quit. That's not nothing. She had a documented cardiac condition, he replied, gently but firmly. The coroner's report says heart failure consistent with her history. No signs of foul play on the surface. Without the bottle, without toxicology, there's nothing I can take to a judge to exhume the body. It'd get laughed out of chambers. He took the bottle, Naomi insisted. He or his mother. They were both in her apartment after she died. I know they were. Do you have security footage? He asked. Witnesses? Anything besides this diary and what you suspect? Naomi opened her mouth, closed it. No, she admitted. The detective sighed and closed the notebook, sliding it back across the desk. I'm not saying your husband is a saint, he said. From the financials you've shown us, he nodded toward the stack of debt letters. Leonard's lawyer had already shared he's done some dirt. Financial crimes, fraud, that's one thing. But murder? We need more than a feeling. Otherwise a defense attorney will chew us up and spit us out. He lowered his voice. Grief plays tricks, Miss Brooks. People look for someone to blame. Maybe she mixed up her own meds. Maybe she was confused. I don't know. But right now, I can't open a homicide investigation on this. Naomi stood slowly. Her knees felt like they might fold, but they didn't. Thank you for your time, she said. Outside, the wind hit harder than before. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and started walking. Not home, not to the corporate apartment she no longer thought of as hers. Her feet took her where they always had when she needed to think, back to Mama's neighborhood. By the time she got to the duplex, it was dark. She flicked on the lamp in the living room and stopped. The TV was on. And our next guest says his wife has been taken from him by money and manipulation, the host was saying, her voice smooth. The show's logo glowed in the corner. City Speaks with Monique Taylor. Naomi's heart slammed once, hard, against her ribs. On the screen, wearing his best good man in pain face, sat Darius Brooks. He wore the same suit head worn to the funeral. His eyes were a little red, his mouth arranged in what might pass for sorrow to someone who didn't know him. I just want her back, he said, looking straight into the camera. We had 10 good years. Then this relative showed up, rich, controlling. He got in her head. She didn't even let me say goodbye to my mother-in-law. We were so close. His voice cracked right on cue. The audience murmured sympathetically. Monique nodded, leaning forward. "And your wife's name is?" "Naomi," he said. "Naomi Ellis Brooks. She's not herself right now. She's under the influence. I just hope she hears this and remembers who we were before the money." The camera cut to another shot. Naomi's mother-in-law, Bernice Brooks, in a church hat and a floral dress, clutching a wadded tissue, tears sliding down her face. "My son is a good man," she wailed. "He worked 2 jobs for that girl, and she turned on him, drove her own mama to the grave, and now she wants to see my boy in jail. Lord, what kind of heart is that?" Naomi stood in the middle of the living room, watching her life being rewritten in real time by people who had hurt her, on a show that would be replayed 100 times on local TV and 1,000 times online. Grief, anger, fear, they all pressed in at once. It would have been easy, in that moment, to curl up and let the story go the way they wanted it to go. Crazy wife, good husband, sad mama. Instead, something shifted deep inside her. "If they can talk," she whispered to the empty room, "so can I." Her eyes fell on the old Singer machine in the corner. On the sketches and scraps Mama had left in a folder, labeled Naomi's Collection. On the dress shed, made from a curtain. On the diary in her bag. She walked over to the table, set her phone up against a stack of fabric, and opened a streaming app. Her thumb hovered for a second over the Go Live button. "Okay, Mama," she said softly. "You hid your truth in a notebook. I'm going to put mine where the whole world can see it." Then she hit Start Broadcast. That first live stream wasn't slick. Naomi's phone propped against a stack of fabric on Etta's old sewing table. The lighting was too yellow, the sound a little echoey, her hands shaking in and out of frame as she talked. A few dozen people clicked in, a few hundred maybe. By the time she finished, she told them her name, told them her mother's name, showed them the little duplex living room, the empty recliner, the Singer machine that had built half the neighborhood's Sunday best. She showed them the debt letters, Mama's diary, the line about the blue bottle. She didn't cry on camera. That surprised even her. When she ended the broadcast, the numbers on the screen didn't look huge. A handful of shares, a few comments from strangers. "I'm so sorry. Stay strong, sis." A couple of small donations that made her throat tighten more than any sympathy. But something had shifted. People outside her block, outside Detroit, now knew the outline of her story. And once the truth meets the internet, it doesn't stay small. A week later, Naomi stood in a different kind of kitchen. The corporate apartment shed once called home felt like a crime scene now. Darius had come through in one of his rages and gutted it. The nice TV? Gone. The laptop? Gone. Dining chairs overturned. Drawers yanked out and left open like pulled teeth. The baseboard heaters were cold and dead. Head shut off the valves and jammed them so they couldn't be turned back without tools. Outside, Detroit was in one of those weird early summer cold snaps, gray and damp. Inside, it felt like a refrigerator. Naomi pulled on 2 sweaters and thick socks and stood in the middle of the chaos, arms wrapped around herself. She thought about going to Leonard's house. He had offered, more than once. "You'll be safe there," Head said. "We have space, security, heat." But the idea of moving into a big house in the suburbs, of going from one man's roof to another's, even if this one was kinder, made something in her recoil. "This is my life," she said out loud to the empty apartment. Her breath came faint in the cold. "He doesn't get to burn me out of it without a fight." She looked around for fabric. The expensive bolts of wool and silk that Etta had saved for her someday collection were gone. Darius had taken those too. All that remained was the ragged practical, old sheets, a few yards of polyester, and the heavy burgundy curtains Head yanked down in a tantrum and left in a heap. Naomi picked one up. The material was thick, cheap velvet, frayed at the edges where the curtain hooks had torn out. "Fine," she said. "Well, start here." She dragged Etta's Singer into the only patch of floor not covered in debris, set a chair upright, and laid the curtain out on the table. Her fingers moved the way they'd moved since she was tall enough to reach the pedal measuring by eye, cutting along lines she saw more than thought. The curtain became panels. The panels became a skirt, with sharp, angled seams. One of Darius' abandoned dress shirts became a fitted bodice. She pieced in stiff interfacing from an old blazer, creating structure where there had been limpness. Dark velvet, white cotton, a line of top stitching to tame a stubborn edge. Stitch by stitch, her grief changed shape. By the time she bit the last thread and knotted it off, her hands were numb from the cold and her back ached. But when she slipped the dress over her head and stood in the bathroom mirror, what stared back at her wasn't just a woman in makeshift fashion. It was a survivor in armor. The dress was strange, yes, a little gothic. The deep burgundy skirt fell like smoke, the bodice hugged her ribs, the neckline cut high and clean. It looked like something a woman would wear to walk out of a fire. She let her hair down, the curls falling around her shoulders, and went back to the living room. The apartment was still frozen, still wrecked. But now there was one thing in it that hadn't come from Darius. She set up her phone again. This time, she turned it so the viewers would see more than her face. Title: How My Husband Stole $150K, Killed My Mama, and Left Me to Freeze. "Hey," she said when the little red light blinked on. "My name is Naomi Ellis Brooks. This dress I'm wearing? It used to be curtains." She panned the camera slowly, letting people see the ripped-out outlets, the empty wall where the TV had been, the dead heater, the frost on the inside of the window. "My husband," she said calmly, "took out $150,000 worth of loans in my name. He did it behind my back. Using a power of attorney, he tricked my mama into signing. He spent the money on another woman's dream." She held up one of the debt letters, the kind of crisp official paper any grown person recognizes. "This is from a bank. This one's from a payday lender. This one's from a company I didn't even know existed until last week. But they all have my name at the top." She laid them down one by one. "Then my mama died," she went on, "and she left me a diary. In that diary, she wrote that my husband switched her heart medication, that he watched her swallow pills that made her chest burn. A week later, she was gone." She opened the notebook and read the last entry out loud. Her voice didn't crack. The comments on the side of the screen began to move faster. She wrote, "If I die, know it wasn't my heart quitting on its own. Check the blue bottle." Naomi looked into the camera. But when I went to her bathroom, the blue bottle was gone. She told them about the power of attorney. The scene at the cemetery. The $1 million land in Oakwood Heights Darius had tried to pry from a grieving daughter's hands. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just laid the facts out like seams on a table. Somewhere around the 15-minute mark, the viewer count started to jump. By half an hour, there were thousands watching. Somebody clipped a section and reposted it. Someone else duetted her on another platform, shaking their head and saying, "This is why you don't sign everything he puts in front of you, ladies." Donations pinged in the corner of the screen. $5, $10, $20, with little messages, for food, for a space heater, for a lawyer. Then came the comment that changed everything. "I saw him." A username from just outside Detroit wrote, "Your husband. At the Route 66 Motor Lodge, by the truck stop off I-75. Red Toyota. Plates covered in mud. He was filling a gas can." Naomi stared at the comment. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. "Screenshot that," she told herself, even before the stream ended. She did, saving it to her photos. Then she called Leonard. Within an hour, his security team and an off-duty cop he trusted were in a car headed down the freeway. They reached the motel just as a clerk was wiping the counter down with a gray rag. "Guy checked out quick," the clerk said when they showed Darius' picture. "Twitchy. Kept looking at his phone. He saw something on the screen, went white as a sheet, paid in cash, grabbed his gas can, and peeled out like the devil was behind him. Headed back toward the city. He saw it," Naomi realized when Leonard called to relay the message. He saw the stream. She pictured Darius sitting on a cheap motel bed, the glow of her video on his phone, hearing her tell the world about his loans, his pressuring Etta, his grab for the land. She imagined the way his pride would curdle into rage. A part of her, some small, old part, felt a flicker of fear. Another part made a quiet decision. If he wanted to drag this into the light, she wouldn't follow him back into the shadows. Public pressure was good. Sympathy was good. But as Leonard liked to remind her, judges didn't sentence people based on comment sections. She needed more than watchers and donations. She needed evidence a lawyer couldn't laugh off. And to get that, she needed someone who had always been in the middle, whether she liked it or not. Bernice. They met in Bernice's cramped apartment on the west side. The place smelled like peppermint oil and old furniture polish. Plastic runners covered the carpet. Religious plaques hung on the walls, staring down at them with solemn eyes. Bernice answered the door in a robe and headscarf, lips pursed, eyes sharp as ever. Well, she said. Look who finally remembered she has a mother-in-law. Come to say sorry for dragging my son's name through the mud on the internet? Naomi stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. Under her coat, in the inside pocket, her phone was already recording. No, she said. I came to talk about money. That got Bernice's attention. Her gaze flicked to Naomi's bag, then back up. What kind of money? She asked, moving toward the kitchen. Coffee? No, thank you. Naomi sat at the table without being asked. I saw the show. I heard you. I'm tired of fighting in public. We both know Darius isn't going to walk away quietly. So I'm prepared to offer a deal. Bernice's eyebrows arched. A deal? When the state pays out for the Oakwood Heights land, Naomi said, a large check is going to have my name on it. I'm willing to give Darius a piece of that. Enough for him to start over when he gets out of whatever trouble he's in. But only if the circus stops. No more TV, no more interviews. And I need you to tell me the truth. Bernice's fingers tapped an irregular beat on the tabletop. What truth? About the pills, Naomi said softly. About the blue bottle. The older woman's face tightened. You're delusional, girl. Your mama was sick. She had a bad heart. The Lord called her home. Naomi leaned in, dropping her voice. You went into her apartment the day after she died, she said. I know you did. There's a camera in the neighbor's peephole. Catches everyone who walks past. I've seen the footage. There was no camera. But fear can be more useful than facts. For the first time since Naomi walked in, Bernice's composure cracked. Her eyes darted toward the door, then the hallway, as if she could see the phantom lens. You're bluffing, she snapped. That building don't have security like that. Try me, Naomi said, echoing Darius' old threat in a lower tone. The detective might be interested too. Especially if I show him Mama's diary and he hears you on tape. Bernice's hand went to her chest. Her breath came shorter. For a moment, Naomi thought she might actually faint. I didn't know, Bernice burst out suddenly. I didn't know what he did. He just asked me to stop by, pick up some things. Said the medicine was expensive, shame to throw it out. I took the bag like he asked. That's all. Did you throw the bottle away? Naomi pressed. In the dumpster by the house, Bernice whispered. Couple days later, after the funeral, trash truck took it. It's gone, Naomi. It's gone. Naomi swallowed the hard lump of disappointment. The one piece of physical evidence her mother had begged her to find was probably sitting at the bottom of some landfill. She changed angles. Why? She asked. Why would you help him do this? You're a mother. You know what it means to lose a child. Why would you stand by while I lost mine? Bernice's eyes flashed. Because he's my child, she said, like it was the only answer that mattered. And you? You never gave him one. 10 years, and not even a maybe. Then she shows up, her mouth twisted. That Tiffany girl. Belly out to here after 2 months. You think I don't see what's going on? Naomi went very still. What about Tiffany? She asked carefully. Bernice clamped her lips shut. Then Naomi dangled the one carrot she knew might move her. You want a future? She asked. You are not getting a check from me. Not after everything. But I can make sure you don't end up in front of a judge as an accomplice. Or I can send that fake peephole footage you're so scared of to the prosecutor instead. Your choice. The older woman deflated a little, shoulders slumping. She's lying to him, Bernice said, bitterness finally bubbling up. That fancy girl. The baby's not his. Naomi's pulse kicked. How do you know? Bernice pushed herself up from the chair and shuffled to an old wooden cabinet in the corner. From behind a stack of church bulletins and a chipped candy dish, she pulled a worn manila envelope. Kyrie, she caught herself. Corrected. Darius got real sick as a boy. Had the mumps bad. Doctor said it messed him up. Wrote in his chart he would never father kids. I kept the records. Never told him. Why break his heart? But when that girl came around pregnant after knowing him for 2 minutes, I knew. She just wants his money. Naomi took the envelope with hands that weren't quite steady. Inside were photocopies of old pediatric records, a urologist's note, lab results. The words irreversible infertility stared up at her in harsh black and white. It was a weapon, but not the kind Shed expected to get. Thank you, Naomi said quietly, sliding the papers into her bag. This isn't about saving him, you know. I know, Bernice said. I just don't want her to win. A few days later, Naomi sat in a small conference room at a downtown hotel, the kind with 2 bright chandeliers and thin carpet over concrete. Leonard was there, calm in his dark suit, Kane by his chair. Across from them, 2 empty seats waited. Naomi placed the pediatric file on the polished table and rested her hands on top of it. They'll come, Leonard said quietly. Pride and greed are very punctual. He was right. On the dot of noon, the door swung open. Darius walked in first, shoulders back, wearing a suit that had seen better pressings but still read as important to anyone who didn't know better. Tiffany Cole floated in behind him in a white bodycon dress that showed off her belly like a badge and a fur coat that still had the tags tucked into the seam. They sat down like 2 people arriving to collect money they'd already spent. Well, Darius said, smiling the TV smile Naomi had seen on City Speaks. Family meeting. I assume you're ready to be reasonable now. He laced his fingers on the table. Here's what I'm thinking. I get 50% of whatever Ellis Holdings is worth, plus something for emotional distress. We call that, say, 20 million? In exchange, I sign off on the land, the apartment, the narrative. Naomi can have her little fashion project, and we all move on. Leonard didn't respond. He just looked at Naomi. Your turn, he said. Naomi opened the file and slid 1 thin page across the table toward Darius. What's this? He frowned, picking it up. Read the diagnosis section out loud, Naomi said. Her voice was steady. Please. His eyes scanned the page. At first, his expression was just confusion. Then the words landed. Complication from mumps, he muttered. Bilateral orchitis. Azoospermia. Irreversible infertility. The last 2 words scraped his throat. Silence spread through the room like spilled ink. Tiffany's smile cracked first. That doesn't mean anything, she snapped. Doctors are wrong all the time. My mother had this in her house, Naomi said. She knew. She watched you call me barren for a decade, knowing the problem wasn't mine. Darius looked from the paper to Tiffany's stomach, his ears flushed red. Is it true? He asked, voice low and dangerous. You knew about this? Tiffany sputtered, searching for a foothold. There was none. It doesn't matter, okay? We're a family. We can adopt. We? Whose baby is it? He roared, slamming his fist on the table so hard the water glasses jumped. The mask slipped. Tiffany's eyes hardened. Not yours, she spat. Happy now? You're broke. You're going to prison. And you couldn't get me pregnant if you tried another 100 years. You think I was going to bet my life on a man who can't even kill properly? The room went very quiet. You want to repeat that last part? Leonard asked conversationally. His eyes had gone flat. Tiffany's mouth opened and closed, but the dam was already broken. He told me what he did, she said, words tumbling out fast. He bragged about it, said his Uncle Elroy got him some special pills from the pharmacy, no prescription. Said your mama was standing between him and $1 million payout. He called it taking care of business. He showed me the bottle, said he hid it in one of the winter tires at that garage co-op on the north side in case anyone ever got cute. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a black streak of mascara. He told me his own mother took the bottle after the funeral, but he didn't trust her. So he made Elroy give him another one. He's paranoid. He keeps everything. Naomi's stomach twisted. It was one thing to read Mama's words, another to hear someone else describe the plan like it was a story they'd laugh about over drinks. Leonard reached for his phone. "Detective Harris," he said when the line picked up. "It's Leonard Ellis. I think we have what you were missing. You're going to want a warrant for Northside Garage Co-op, Unit 47, and for the Brooks Family Pharmacy on Jefferson. Ask for Elroy. Bring a strong stomach." He ended the call, looked at Darius. "You are not just fired anymore, Mr. Brooks," he said softly. "You are finished." Darius glared at Naomi with a hatred so sharp, it almost felt like a physical thing in the air. "This is your fault," he hissed. "All of this. You think they care about you? You're just a show to them. A story." Naomi stood. "I would rather be a story than your victim," she said. "Sit tight, Darius. The law is finally catching up." He didn't sit tight, of course. By the time Detective Harris and his team got to the garage, the winter tire was right where Tiffany said it would be. Inside, cushioned in dust and rubber, was a blue pill bottle with a crooked label. At the pharmacy, they found Elroy's black ledger with KP, special order, $5,000 written in a neat, guilty hand. But at the hotel, when the officers went to take Darius formally into custody, he asked to use the restroom like any man with a bladder and a conscience. There was a tiny window in that restroom. It led to an alley. The alley led to a side street. The side street led to the kind of choices a desperate man makes. He went to his mother's apartment first. Later, the police report would note the sedative residue in Bernice's blood, the empty jewelry box, the cleaned-out lockbox at the bank. He pawned everything fast, dumped the cash into a retainer for a famous defense attorney, and used what was left to buy gasoline. You already know where he went after that. Back to the corporate apartment at Jefferson Tower, where a woman in a curtain dress sat in a freezing room with a diary and a camera, trying to turn her pain into something useful. Back to the thin metal door that had kept their life in and the world out. Back to the moment we started this whole story with. The smell of gasoline, the scrape of a lighter, his laughter, high and wild, as flames crawled under the door and tried to erase everything had done. We've walked you up to that line again. Not because I like watching anyone fall, but because you need to understand this. Fire was never his first weapon. Control was, silence was, shame was. But when those stopped working, when Naomi started talking, when she dragged his private evil into public light, fire was the last thing he had left. And as you've already heard, it still wasn't enough to burn her away. By the time the embers in Jefferson Tower cooled, Darius Brooks had a new kind of fire working for him, a lawyer. Not the overworked public defender Naomi had imagined, but Reginald Hayes, a man whose face sometimes showed up on the local news when a complicated, ugly case needed another side of the story. He was the kind of attorney who never raised his voice, never spilled his coffee, and always seemed to talk about his clients as if they were unfortunate weather patterns instead of people who'd made choices. At his first press conference, he stood on the courthouse steps, camera lights bouncing off his perfect tie. "My client," Hayes said, "is a man under extraordinary stress. Financial collapse. The sudden death of a beloved mother-in-law. Marital breakdown. Public humiliation. In that state, anyone's mind can crack. What happened at that apartment building was a tragic nervous breakdown, not a calculated crime. Mr. Brooks doesn't need punishment. He needs treatment." Naomi watched that clip on her phone in a tiny furnished sublet across town. The bandage on her shoulder itched from the strain of hanging off the balcony roof. Her lungs still burned when she walked too fast. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flames licking under the door. "A breakdown?" she repeated softly. "Is that what we call it now?" Leonard, sitting across from her, rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Insanity is a classic play," he said. "If Hayes can convince a jury Darius didn't know what he was doing, he spends a couple of years in a nice facility and comes out with a clean bill. And then what?" Naomi asked. "Moves into somebody else's life and does it again?" "That's why we don't let that happen," Leonard said simply. They both knew the diary and the blue bottle and Tiffany's testimony would go a long way. But as Hayes understood too well, Juries are human. They might pity a man who looked broken by grief. They might blame the rich uncle and the wife who went public. They might decide everyone shared the guilt. They needed a witness who could cut through the performance. The doorbell rang. Naomi's new security guard checked the hallway, then opened the apartment door. Bernice Brooks shuffled in, and for the first time since Naomi had known her, she didn't look like someone ready to judge a dust mote. Her coat was too thin for the air, her eyes were swollen. Her hair, usually wrapped tight and neat for church, frizzed out from under a crooked scarf. "He took everything," Bernice said before anyone asked. She dropped to her knees on the cheap carpet, clutching at Naomi's hem like it was a life preserver. "My boy. My son. He drugged my tea, emptied my safe, cleaned out my lockbox at the bank, left me with nothing but a heap of bills and a notice from the marshal on my door." Naomi thought of the old pediatric file in her bag, of the way Bernice had held on to it all those years, lying to her face about fertility while knowing the truth. It was hard to feel sorry, but it was easy to see opportunity. "You chose him over me," Naomi said quietly. "Over the truth. Over my mama. Now he's chosen himself over you. Maybe we finally understand each other." Bernice sobbed harder. "I'll do anything," she choked. "I'll tell them everything. The pills, the way he talked, how he laughed about that land. Just don't let them throw me in jail too. I won't survive in there." Naomi looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Get your coat," she said. "We're going to see Mama." The cemetery looked different in late summer. The snow was gone, replaced by patchy grass and little clumps of wildflowers that didn't know they were growing in grief. Etta's headstone had settled. Someone, Naomi didn't ask, who had left a small bouquet of silk lilies tied with a purple ribbon. Naomi stood at the foot of the grave. Leonard stood a little farther back, phone in his hand, camera app open. "You kneel there," Naomi told Bernice, pointing to the space in front of the stone. "You talk to her. You tell the truth. All of it. Loud enough for the dead and the living." Bernice hesitated, then sank to her knees, joints popping audibly. She pressed her palms into the dirt and lifted her face to the photo on the stone. Etta's smile forever frozen. "Etta," she began, her voice trembling. "Sister, I'm sorry. I knew. Lord, forgive me. I knew." She spoke haltingly at first, then faster, words tumbling out like water finally breaking past a dam. How Darius had joked about removing obstacles. How Head bragged about Uncle Elroy's pills. How Shed helped hide the bottle because she thought the money would save them all. "He is not crazy," she cried, Hez not confused. "He knew. He planned. Hez a snake that walks on two legs. Put him away, Etta. Let your girl be free." When she finished, she sagged forward, forehead touching the cold stone. Leonard stopped the recording. For a moment, no one moved. "You're not going to show that to everyone, are you?" Bernice whispered, looking up at Naomi with haunted eyes. "My friends. My church." "You don't have a church anymore," Naomi said gently but firmly. "You have a chance. A life in some little town where nobody knows your name, or a prison number. I've already bought the bus ticket. It's up to you which hand you take." Later that day, when Bernice opened the envelope expecting cash and pulled out a one-way ticket to Tupelo, Mississippi instead, she howled like the world had ended. But in the end, she took the ticket. Pride doesn't keep you warm at night. A roof? Any roof. Does. Naomi watched her walk through the bus station doors with a small duffel bag and no more jewelry. She felt no triumph, just a deep, tired kind of closure, one thread cut, one to go. The trial started in early October. By then, local media had already named it the Black Widower case, as if Darius were some tragic, romantic villain instead of a man who'd nearly set his wife on fire. The courthouse steps filled with reporters. Inside, the gallery benches creaked under the weight of curious neighbors, true crime fans, and people who'd been following Naomi's streaming updates since that first night in the freezing apartment. Hayes did exactly what Naomi and Leonard knew he would. He painted Darius as a broken man, overwhelmed by pressure, abandoned by his wife, consumed by grief over the death of a woman he loved like his own mother. He even tried to use Naomi's live streams against her, calling them attention-seeking, suggesting she was exploiting her own trauma for views. But facts have a way of cutting through performance when they're sharp enough. The prosecutor laid them on the table one by one. The forged loans, the transfers to Tiffany's account, the power of attorney tricked out of Etta, the diary, the blue bottle, the lab report confirming the drug interaction, Elroy's ledger and his pale face on the stand, Tiffany's reluctant testimony, and, finally, the video from the cemetery, with Bernice's voice shaking as she begged a dead woman for forgiveness. "Does this look like a man who didn't understand what he was doing?" the prosecutor asked the jury. As the screen froze on Darius' face lit by the apartment fire, laughter caught mid-shout. When it was Naomi's turn, she walked to the witness stand in a simple dark dress she'd sewn herself. Not armor this time, just cloth that fit well and let her breathe. She swore to tell the truth. She did, 10 years of it. At the end, when the judge asked Darius if he had anything to say before sentencing, he pointed at Naomi and screamed that she was a witch, that she'd turned his own mother against him, that she'd ruined his life. The judge looked at him for a long moment, then down at the file on his desk. "Mr. Brooks," he said, "you ruined your own life. She just refused to burn with you. 25 years. State prison, restitution, no parole before 20. It didn't bring Etta back. It didn't erase the debt notices or the scars on Naomi's lungs, but it put a wall between her and the man who'd tried so hard to erase her. That was enough." 6 months later, the building on Jefferson had a new face, fresh paint, new windows, the fire damage wiped away, replaced with clean lines and warm lighting. Above the glass door on the ground floor, a new sign in brass letters read, "Etta Bespoke Fashion." On opening day, a small crowd of women gathered outside. Some had followed Naomi online. Some had just heard there was a new place in Detroit where a dress wasn't just off the rack, but made for you, with care. Naomi stepped out to cut the red ribbon in a deep burgundy pantsuit that fit her like it had grown there. She'd designed it herself, strong shoulders, clean lines, a high collar that made her stand a little taller. She smiled at the crowd, at the cameras, at Leonard, standing off to the side like a proud, tired uncle. Then she looked up, just for a second, at the 5th-floor windows above the shop. They were new glass now. No smoke stains. No black streaks. Just sky and reflection. She didn't see flames. She saw possibility. Later that week, before the rush of orders and fittings and fabric swatches could sweep her up completely, she drove out to the prison. Not because she missed Darius. She didn't. She went because there was one small, petty, perfectly human thing she wanted to do. In the visiting room, they put her on one side of the thick glass and him on the other. The orange jumpsuit didn't make him look smaller, but time already had. The lines around his mouth were deeper. The anger in his eyes, if anything, had grown. "You came to gloat?" he asked, picking up the phone receiver. "No," she said. "I came to settle accounts." She held up a file folder to the glass, then slid one sheet through the small slot at the bottom. "First page is the divorce decree," she said. "It went through without you. You are, legally, a single man now. Free as you're going to be for a good long while." He sneered. "The second," she went on, "is a bill." He glanced down, then back up, confused. "It's for that dinner," Naomi explained. "The night my mother died. Groceries, prep time, cooking, serving. Emotional damages. I charge double on the day of a funeral. Comes to about $800. She smiled, not unkindly. "The marshals sold your car at auction. After the fees. That's almost exactly what was left. So consider this notice that we're square. You don't owe me. I don't owe you. We're done." "You're insane," he hissed, slamming his palm against the glass. "You always were." "Maybe," she said, "but at least I'm free." She hung up the phone and walked out into the sunlight. Detroit's sky was still the color of steel, but the air felt different on her skin now. Softer, roomier, like the world had more space in it than it used to. Back at the shop, there was a line at the door and a sketchbook on her table with new designs waiting. Women wanted clothes that fit their lives. Naomi wanted a life that fit her. They were all going to get what they came for. If you've stayed with me all the way to this point, thank you. Stories like Naomi's aren't easy. They drag us through fire and courtrooms and old family wounds. But they also remind us of something quiet and powerful. You are allowed to walk away from what burns you, even if you helped build it. You are allowed to start again. Now, before you go, let me ask a favor. If this story kept you company today while you were cooking, resting, folding laundry, or just sitting with your thoughts, consider hitting that subscribe button so we can sit together again in the next one. If there was something in the story that didn't sit right with you, or a choice you would have made differently than Naomi, tell me in the comments. I read them, and they help me grow. And if you still don't quite know how you feel, but you'd like to support more real-life stories like this, tap the like button anyway. It's a tiny gesture on your side, but it teaches me and this channel what touches you and what we need to do better next time. Thank you, truly, for giving me your time and your ears all the way to the end. Now, before you leave, take a look at the end screen. There are more life stories waiting for you there. Just click, lean back, and let the next chapter begin.